I wanted to talk about this clip from Donald Trump. Okay, now originally it was a Dan Bongino clip, and Dan Bongino, for those of you who might not be familiar with him, let me just give you a summation of who he is quickly.
This is Karate Man. Double leg, the jump kick, the side kick, the roundhouse, the tie kick, body.
I don't know if we're gonna actually watch Dan Bongino clips. I think every time there's a Dan Bongino clip, we'll just say what was on the clip, and we'll just show that clip, because obviously that clip shows that, you know, obviously that's the deputy FBI director. Anyway, he was on a Dan Bongino show, and he suggested on the Dan Bongino show, after Dan Bongino left a deputy FBI director position, after talking about, oh, you know, we're going to smoke out, you know, the deep state, we're going to smoke out this, we're going to smoke out this. He goes out in there, he spends 1 year in the sauna, and he gets out. He was smoked out. Okay, he's gone. Donald Trump says that he believes that Republicans should take control and they need to nationalize elections. And then he specifies that he wants to take the power of managing elections away from states and give it to the federal government. And then he says the amount of states he wants to do this is at least 15. At least 15. So if you were to imagine what states they may be, I'm going to put forward, and I do not want to be presumptuous. I'm not one to be presumptuous, but I'm going to put forward that they're not states that he won. It's not, I don't think it's going to be Oklahoma. I have a sneaking suspicion that it is not going to be Tennessee or Mississippi. I think it is much more likely to be places like Pennsylvania, places like Minnesota, places that he has consistently lost. And if he says at least 15 places, you can get a lot of swing states in that area, or states that Republicans may have used to be competitive in to some capacity. So whether or not he would do a complete federalization of elections, meaning that they would manage it in all 50 states, whether it would just be a concentrated federalization of elections in areas that Donald Trump does not perform well in, Donald Trump did seem to show an indication that he wanted to take the power away, which is given to states by the Constitution, from those states and give it to the federal government. After this Dan Bongino friendly softball interview where Dan Bongino didn't want to ask him any difficult questions about that, like, wait a second, I'm a constitutionalist. What about the Constitution and the power of states to manage? He didn't, like, you know, really challenge the president on that as his new podcast host, as he doesn't want to be deputy director anymore. And so the next time he was before, you know, some actual press, he was asked about this.
What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections, and which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest, and if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it, because, you know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. But when you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia. You go take a look at Atlanta. Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections, and the federal government should not.
See, what we said, you know, it's going to be places that he lost. You know, it's places that he lost. It's never, oh, it was Oklahoma. It's never somewhere that he won. And in fact, I do want to put forward that in 2024, when there was a period where in areas it might look like he was actually not performing quite well versus Harris, they actually did start that narrative machine up before pulling it back after it was clear that Donald Trump was going to win. Even though a lot of times it would just be rebranded as, Well, there of course still was cheating, but we won so big that we stopped the steal. You know, we stopped the great fraud.
Allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
Now, Donald Trump has never, displayed how these states have not been able to count the votes legally and honestly. He brought the election to court multiple times. He didn't get anywhere. People have been talking about something coming out of how the election was stolen, how it was all rigged, how it was, Trump was done in with, evil intent, and that the deep state stole it, or Q is gonna, where we go one, where we go all, they're gonna reveal some new deep state. Nothing ever came, and nothing is seemingly ever going to come. And so instead of waiting for some new truth to come, it seems that Donald Trump is making it up as we go. Let me give one example as this. Let me give one example. Here is Donald Trump talking to reporters about why Tulsi Gabbard was at the location of that raid in Georgia. There was a raid at the county of great controversy at the last election, where they were saying, "Oh my God, this county, there was great fraud, there was great horrible this XYZ." They were hiding the ballots there. None of this was shown to be true. It was shown to be conspiracism. There was nothing that was proven. Nothing went forward on the courts. And since then, there has been no evidence that has been overturned showing that Fulton County was the house of some theft of the U.S. presidency from Donald Trump. By the way, even if you were to overturn the Georgia election results, Biden still would have won the election. I didn't want to throw that out there. This isn't a case of like 2000. It was a razor thin margin of 1,000 vote difference. It was enough where Biden won. He had some buffer state. If you have some buffer state left, you're over like 300 points. Then it's not necessarily a dominant dog walking, but it certainly wasn't razor thin either. Even if it took a while to count the votes, Donald Trump did not get stolen. He did not have his election stolen from him, but he continues to push this lie. And it's not that I'm warning you guys that he's lying. That's very clear. What I do think is that now Donald Trump, through raiding Fulton County with the FBI and trying to get the voting rolls, they are going to try to create a narrative about how elections are rigged and how this is just one example, could be happening across the country, and then use that to try to challenge the result of the 2026 election if it is not conductive towards the political ends that he wants. He has never lost an election that he's come out and said, fair game, GG, it is what it is. Even in the Republican primary, when he didn't need to win every single primary election, he was going out there saying that the competition was rigging it against him. That he was out there and that they were, oh, Ben Carson rigged it against me. This person rigged it against me. Oh, they say I lost this one, but actually, fraud could do this, X, Y, and Z. So it wasn't just like, oh, it's the Democrat. He was every single time he would run into a community that for either the demographics of the area just not vibing with Trumpism, his message not reaching them, or, him not investing the proper campaign materials and effort in order to convince those people. Any failure was easily explained away by, the system is going to do what the system does. And so this is not necessarily me losing. This is the system stopping me from winning. It's the narrative of the downtrodden. It's how Donald Trump raised in immense wealth and eating from a literal golden spoon is somehow the victim here. But here is Tulsi Gabbard's role in this. Tulsi Gabbard went down there to Fulton County, and there was pictures and photographs showing that she was down there. And they said that it was within her role as National Security Advisor to the president. Now, National Security Advisor, not National Security Advisor, as the chief intelligence official in the country, chief intelligence official advising the president. Her role is to basically look at all of the gathered intelligence, come to the president, and prepare their presidential daily brief, saying, here's all the classified material and news that you need to know about in order to make decisions and to have a good idea of what's going on in case you want to act on something. Active terror threats, atomic weapons programs, assassinations that the CIA could or could not do, maybe, stuff that you would expect a top level intelligence official to be doing, potential threats that don't become anything and threats that do become something. Either way, she was sent down there. Why? Her job is to deal with like foreign intelligence threats and terror threats and that such. Why is she in Fulton County, Georgia, seemingly practicing some sort of, involving herself in some sort of raid where they're trying to get election ballot? Like, I mean, there's a question of breaking the chain of custody. There's a bunch of questions to be asked about this FBI raid. But why is she there? Now, Donald Trump was asked this exact question as to why somebody whose main issue is to deal with, foreign intelligence threats and inform the president of them, despite a lack of previous experience managing, intelligence organizations or high-level classified material. Here is Donald Trump answering this question directly.
Why is Tulsi Gabbard there?
I don't know, but a lot of the cheating comes from it's international cheating. You have people, they say, from China trying to.
You put this on
let me ask
Truth
you,
Social.
do you think China tries to influence our election?
We know that foreign governments try to influence a lot of things in this country.
Therefore, she's foreign governments.
But
Look, the big concentration on this clip is the latter part of this clip where he says she's foreign government. Can Tulsi Gabbard be compromised? Out of everybody in Trump's orbit, this is me being blunt, I think she's the most likely. I'm not saying she is compromised. I'm just saying if I was a betting man and this was a racetrack and I had to pick which one in Trump's immediate circle is a foreign intelligence asset, Tulsi Gabbard would probably be my first pick. And considering that this wouldn't be the first time that people in Trump's orbit ended up, I mean, the Turkish government, look, okay. Reeling it in. That last part seems to be him saying that her issue is dealing with foreign governments. If foreign governments are trying to influence American elections, then this is also her purview. Now, mind you, the accusation was never that China changed that China went into Georgia. They went into Fulton County. And then they voted away, Donald Trump out of office. That China printed a bunch of new ballots, or they, changed the votes. That was never the accusation. It was never put on the feet of China. It was put on the feet of Russia. We had investigations into this. There is attempts to influence social media. That is true. That certainly is done by the Russians through the Internet Research Agency. Yevgeny Prigozhin was heavily involved in trying to not only, affect around election time, trying to do some amount of electioneering. He was also heavily involved in trying to get Black Lives Matter and anti-Black Lives Matter protesters at the same spot in order to have them scuffle and interact. He would set up like fake Facebook groups in order to say, oh, we organize protests in this area. We want people to come out for George Floyd. And then on the other end, it'd be like, hey, patriotic, brave Americans, you done, driving your big old truck. Come on down here to the Minneapolis Oblast, to the Minnesota Oblast, and come on and protest. And then, they would clash. So it's not that there isn't an attempt by foreign governments to both influence our public elections, influence a public conflict in order to have us basically fight each other more. That happens, but none of that has to do with the actual conducting of elections. And the little bit of it that does with the possible attempted hackings, none of that has to do with the voting rolls in Fulton County, Georgia. What does that have to do with the voter rolls? That it'd be one thing if, hey, we have evidence that we did XYZ. We have evidence that Russia changed the results. We have evidence of that. But the idea that they try to influence our elections, yes, but that doesn't mean they changed the results. So why would you take the voting rolls? You would have to say, like, we have some evidence of some misdeed. The problem is, when asked why is she there, he says, I don't know. Now, why mind you, her job is to prepare his presidential daily brief. Her job is literally to keep the president informed. How does he not know what she's doing? How does she not know why she's in Fulton County? dealing with his biggest pet project, his mythology. How the Third Reich sent out certain archaeologists to build a certain Aryan mythos. This is Trump's Aryan mythology, not of this idea of this super race of people, but under the idea of the man who could never lose an election, the supernatural man who could never lose an election no matter what, even when the results say otherwise. The mythology of the man always foiled no matter what by the deep state establishment. Any failure is not of his own doing or of his own failure to deliver a good economic message to the people or lead the country. It is all due to the deep state. He's building that mythology, and this is something to help build that mythology, but it has nothing to do with her role here. This is something that really, to me, looks like Donald Trump pointing at Fulton County saying, we need to go do something, get me something, get me evidence that the election's rigged, get me evidence that the elections were stolen, do something. And this is what they did. I don't know that that's what happened, but the idea that he doesn't know that Tulsi Gabbard is in Fulton County is absurd. She is his top intelligence official. How do you not know about your top intelligence official going and dealing with your biggest pet issue that directly affects your ego and the mythology you're trying to build around your movement? It's nonsense. He knows why she's there, but for whatever reason, he does not feel comfortable saying that he knows that she's there and what for and exactly what's going on. He's trying to give himself layers of separation between him, Tulsi Gabbard, and the knowledge of what she is doing. Why? Why this disbelief in why? This doesn't make any sense to me unless she's up to no good in the neighborhood. Like, what else could she be doing but something that would not be good if Donald Trump was directly connected to it? Now, maybe there are scenarios somebody could draw out that Donald Trump, he wants to keep the operation on a down low, so he doesn't bring a lot of attention to it because he's going to bust the Chinese operation in Fulton County, right? But this is going to have to come with some amount of evidence and not just, that foreign governments try to influence our election. Yeah, we know that, but that doesn't mean you could just raid random counties and take all the voter rolls, because foreign governments have always been trying to influence our elections. I mean, foreign governments have influenced elections in foreign countries. We have done that. Other countries have done that to us. We would never do such a thing. We would never do such a thing. But that doesn't mean that you can just go and take the voter rolls and then have your top intelligence official participating in the election process like this, or possibly interfering in the election process like this. And what seems to be an operation to build Trump's mythos of the man who can never lose, the man who may deserve a third term, who should have already had a third term because he won 3 times, so maybe a fourth. This is toxic. This is toxic for his image, because I think people don't really care as much about this as he does, obviously. He should be spending time on, I think, more grassroots issues that would actually maybe win people over, like the economy. And I think that people don't like him focusing on stuff like this, so that's obviously a negative. But like, lastly, like this isn't gonna this isn't gonna turn out any like Chinese spies here. This isn't gonna turn. So, what's the end game? What's the end game? If I was to think of the end game of what would be worth it, is being able to challenge a result. What would be worth it is being able to kick up a storm and motivate your base. Yes, that could be one motivation. Build the mythos, yes, but another could be challenging the results of a democratic election, which he tends to do every single time, and we should have no expectation that if the midterms don't go his way, that he's not going to make a hubbub about it. It could be that he's waiting to make the hubbub in 3 years if he's trying to run again, or he's going to have some predecessor come. I mean, not predecessor, but new take under my wing, you shall go and complete my mission, or what, or it's going to be the midterms. Either way, though, he seems to be building the mandate to disregard election results, which is right up his alleyway. What are you going? What are you doing? You want to make a comment, Patrick? Yeah. Okay, but you got to peer in your face like creepily. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's the first time that we've seen propaganda directed upwards. It's like, don't tell grandma that grandpa's dead. Like he wants to build like a magical fantasy world like Michael Jackson wanted to do. Like he wants it to be the Neverland Ranch and never hear anything bad about himself. He's not trying to convince anybody of anything. It's vice versa. He only wants information like directed at himself that's good news. He's like, bring me no bad news. That's his agenda, in my opinion.
Do you think if he can make the general news act like his personal news, then maybe the public will see what he sees is so great about himself? Maybe that's it.
Maybe, but right now I think he's in the phase.
You got it.
Okay, right. Sorry. Right now I think he's in the phase of like doing bad things to distract from worse things, which is when you're really wilding out and like you're fucked and you're acting crazy. Like he's definitely in a spiral. That's when you're in a spiral. It's like when you rob a bank to distract the fact that you killed somebody. Like, I don't know. I think that really, really is out of control.
That's the Patrick Hillsman take. Patrick Hillsman. He was he's a co-founder of the organization known as the Proud Boys. He stormed the Capitol on January 6th. He was a third participant with Enrique Tarrio. He was the guy who kept throwing ham at federal officers.